Candy by IIA.
I won't let my kids trick-or-treat this Halloween. Not after what happened last year. Not when half the town's parents are still in mourning, and every other week you see cribs and twin-sized beds by the curb for everyone to come by and pick up. They're stark reminders that the losses cut deep around here. The pain is still there, and even if these wounds have started to heal for some, they'll always itch. Last year, kids received tainted candy. 55 got sick, and 31 died. It was all over the news, so I don't need to go into a background story that you already know. My girls, thank God, were lucky. They're both allergic to peanuts, so they just gave the candies to their friends. Friends they don't have anymore. I remember my shift in the ER when the kids started trickling in. It took a few days. The first one was on November 3rd. A 4-year-old named Regina. She was having trouble breathing. At first, we thought it was just an allergic reaction, but none of the treatments seemed to work. She just kept getting worse, and it was only after we scoped out to get a look inside her lungs that we realized what was happening. By then, though, it was too late. She died on the table. 3 more young kids came in that night. They all died. The next day, a trickle had become a flood. Older kids joined the younger ones with trouble breathing. These seemed worse off than the kids from the night before. The initial symptoms had given way to the secondary ones before death, so we had to deal with the shock and terror they were experiencing as their condition progressed. The CDC representatives arrived not long after 10 more had died. They were able to quickly trace the source to the contaminated candy. The local chocolate producer was determined to be at fault, and a speedy investigation revealed exactly how the candies were contaminated. Thank God the business was shut down. The owners are still tied up in court cases for their negligence and refusal to comply with proper importation safeguards. Like I said, after a year it's all still fresh in the minds of so many of the families. They'll go their whole lives associating the holiday with death and devastation, rather than fun and excitement. Out of respect for that, few yards are decorated for Halloween nowadays. There are some pumpkins on front steps, but no real displays. Well, there'd be that one. A Japanese family who'd moved to town in August had been mostly unaware of the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. They'd bought the house across the street from me. Excited to celebrate Halloween in America for the first time, they decorated their front lawn with all manner of skeletons, pumpkins, monsters, and spiders. A couple neighbors visited them the next day and carefully explained to them what had happened the year before. The decorations were down in an hour. It wasn't that anyone was truly angry that the decorations were there. Most of them were fine. Had they just left 3 or 4 things up, no one would have really complained. Hell, some people who were lucky enough not to have been touched by the tragedies might have appreciated a little Halloween spirit. But for some, seeing that one thing was just too much. Even I, who hadn't lost anyone, cringed a little when I saw the setup. It made me think of that night on November 3rd, when Regina had come into the hospital. I remember the scope going down into her lungs. I remember how we stared at the screen in a combination of horror and fascination. It wasn't a skeleton, or a pumpkin, or even a monster that had killed those children. It was the spiders. The millions of tiny black spiders whose eggs had been in the cocoa powder decorating the finished chocolate and peanut butter candies. The kids who suffocated before the spiders had exited their lungs were the lucky ones. It was those in the waiting room of the car or the ambulance who had hacked and coughed up clouds of them as they died who had it the worst. The Japanese family apologized profusely as they removed all the decorations. It was obvious they were mortified. As I watched them out the window, I saw Gishi wave his wife Ai over to get a close look at the lawn. Her eyes widened, and she put her hand over her mouth. Though I couldn't see what they were looking at, I knew what it was. Ever since last November, there have been webs all over the place. They're small, only the size of about a quarter, but immediately recognizable as being from the same Honduran spider that had been accidentally imported by the chocolate shop owners. The town is infested with them. I try not to get too close to the corners and eaves of my house because I know they're there. Harmless, but there. Just another cruel reminder. One of too many. I haven't touched a piece of chocolate in over 350 days. I dread having to use the scope when I'm at work in the ER. And nearly every night, I dream about how it all happened, only to jolt awake with the feeling of spiders squirming through my lungs and sinuses.